Addiction ranks as one of the most serious problems in society, robbing families and individuals of all they have. One of the most relevant statistics about addiction is that 100% of all addictions begin with the first use. What you are about to see is real. Their story is your story. Your family, your neighbor, someone you know, or someone you love.
Substance abuse is a worldwide problem. It affects every strata of society. Literally everyone knows someone who has suffered from or is now battling with substance abuse. Substance abuse is a disease, and like all diseases, its effects and pathology impact individuals differently. We at Abaris understand this and are dedicated and determined to use all of our skill and knowledge to effect at least great improvements and at best a full cure for you or someone you love. Addiction, pervasive, insidious, all-consuming, claiming victims from every strata of society regardless of intelligence, education, financial background, or gender. From childhood onward, there is no individual, no family, no circumstance that is immune. Addiction.
I do drugs. I'm on the streets because I do drugs. I was somebody's mother, I'm somebody's daughter, I'm somebody's sister.
Addiction. Girls in their teens and early 20s start out pretty and fresh, but end ugly and jaded, becoming public receptacles, selling their lives one trick at a time, drawing closer to their deaths, one fix at a time. A few years on the street as a hard addict takes 30 or 40 years off of a girl's life. At the end, she has nothing and is nothing. Ugly, vicious, and spent. A human piece of garbage that no one cares about. Normal life, a faded, distant memory. Addiction.
These are my hands. This is what drugs did to me. They took my teeth. They have abscessed my hands. I have scars upon my legs from shooting heroin. I used to weigh 225 pounds. I'm now down to 135 pounds. I prostitute myself in order to get heroin. Drugs have done nothing but ruin my life and take it from me. You don't want to be in the position I'm in. I've been doing it for 15 years. I used to smoke crack, that's why my teeth are like that. Drugs will get you nowhere.
Addiction. When an addict is consumed by addiction and death has triumphed, the suffering does not abate. Those that are left behind must wonder at the loss of promise and all that may have been. Addiction.
I never wanted to lose my sister, and it was just extremely sad. She had struggled with alcoholism and drugs. She continued to have problem after problem, and everywhere she went, she tended to burn bridges behind her. Everyone that she lived with and the people that she became close with had to sever ties with her eventually. She just bled people dry and just progressed in her disease. That was actually our last conversation. She wanted money when she got out, and I wanted to get her into a treatment center, and she wasn't interested in that. She just wanted to get back out. And a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call from social services asking me to call the intensive care unit at Munson Hospital up in Traverse City, and I did. And at that point, she was still alive for another half hour. It was just horrible. She was actually living out of a storage unit up in Traverse City. She had progressed that far downward, and it was just a horrid shame that seems so easily avoidable, but yet it's not. That disease, I understand what kind of grip that disease had on her, and how difficult it was for her to try and find recovery. And people that from the outside just can't understand how someone could let themselves fall that low. But anyone who has the disease of addiction understands completely how that can happen.
Addiction. The most brutal suffering and the shortest road to total emotional devastation is the senseless and vicious loss of a precious child.
There were three other boys with him that night, and it was a snap decision. Apparently the plan fell through of going to the movies. According to them, my son Andrew said, "Let's go." Whatever he said, get high, I guess. My son went into the house, came out on the console of his car, snorted the drug, and as he was driving home, he stated that, "Wow, I'm really kind of messed up, I can't drive." So they pulled up in front of our house and made a phone call to our house and said, "You better go out and see your son, he's not doing so well." Out the door and saw him in the passenger seat, and he looked like he was passed out, but his color looked funny. So I slapped him a few times or shook him and called his name, and he didn't respond, so I pulled him onto the ground on our grass in front of our house, and I realized that this was bad. I started to do CPR on him. Meanwhile, there was nobody around. The boys that dropped him off took off running. The ambulance, I continued to do CPR. And my husband was kind of freaking out in the background, calling his name. And of course, when the ambulance came, neighbors and everybody came out. When the paramedics came over, they told me to move, and I remember hearing them say, "No pulse." So then I thought, God, I've been doing this CPR and nothing was happening. You know, I was kind of shocked. And so they put him in the ambulance, and I went with them. And the only kid that he hung around with, I had a phone number in my cell phone. I called him. I had the cell phone in my pocket. And I called his friend, and I said, "What, were you with Andrew? What did he take? What's going on?" And this kid said, "I don't know, let me make some calls. I haven't seen him all night." And so after we were in the hospital and they were doing everything they had to do, the kid called me back and said he took heroin. And I said, "Heroin? What do you mean heroin?" He said, "Yeah, he snorted heroin, that's what they tell me." And so by that time the hospital had done what they have to do to reverse, and they were able to bring him back, I guess, after 2 days of being on the ventilator, and his brain was swelling. And they said that was a danger that could happen. And they told us that, you know, they did the test and he was brain dead. And they asked us if we wanted to donate organs. And my daughters and my husband and I talked, and we decided that that's what Andrew would want to do. And so he was an organ donor. And that's the only good thing that came out of all of this.